Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. I'm honored today to have Dr. Patricia Fogarty Mack with me. She champions patient safety and quality improvement at Weill Cornell Medicine. Hello, Dr. Mack, or Patricia, rather. Can I call you Patricia?
Absolutely.
Hi, nice to have you at Back to Basics.
Oh, thank you. I'm so pleased to be here with you.
Well, I'm super excited because actually we got connected through one of my favorite episodes so far of Back to Basics, Dr. Ruth Gautian, and she was marvelous. And she has been, recommending to talk to people like you that are, I'm sure, so inspirational.
Oh, that's very kind.
And then, of course, we're still in pandemic time. So obviously anybody that is in the medicine field, health field, and something like you are doing, like improving patients' quality, and their experience, that's something I'm very curious and looking forward talking to you about.
Well, it's much appreciated. It's been a long year, but I think we're actually turning the corner now and doing things even better than we have been.
That's great to hear. So, obviously I do a little research on all my guests and I mean, you have an amazing career and one that, if I understand correctly, you went to school in New York, right?
I went to medical school in New York, yes.
To medical school. And it's you stayed where you went to school, right?
Yes, I did a little bit of training at 2 other places, but basically I've been here for 35 years.
And I love that. And I'm not jumping ahead because I'm going to start about asking you about your childhood and, things you were passionate about. Did you know you wanted to be a doctor as a little girl? Tell me a little bit about your early years.
I did, actually. I don't really recall when I started to want to be a doctor. Sometime in grammar school. I'm an only child, and my parents were older. And I think that they just sort of treated me a little bit like a small adult, even when I was a child. I recall always going to the library with my dad every Saturday morning. And, I was very much into reading and learning about things. And I recall reading some books about things in the early 1900s in New York, like typhoid and the public health measures taken to cure that. And I just found that really interesting and fascinating. Wow.
And were you born in New York?
Yes, I was.
Oh, there you go. You continue my streak. I'm joking in my episodes that, a good chunk of my guests recently have been all from New York. I love it. I love it. And so about growing up in New York City sounds also very exciting.
Well, I actually spent the first 13 years of my life in the Bronx.
Okay.
In a community that used to be the world's largest apartment complex. Mm-hmm. And we were there because my uncle was a priest. And so the extended family of, my parents and my grandparents actually moved to this area from Manhattan originally. And so even though I was an only child, I had many, many cousins around me, and we all went to the same grammar school. And it was just a lot of fun. It was a very supportive community. Used to walk to school, go out to lunch at a local restaurant from school. And it was really very nice. Unfortunately, the neighborhood did change and crime became a problem. And my dad was a retired New York City police officer. Mm-hmm. And so we moved to the suburbs, and I went to high school in the suburbs.
Wow.
And, I was sad to leave the Bronx. It was just great to be so close to extended family. And it was very easy. I lived in an apartment, but you walked everywhere, and it had a playground down the street, and it was just very easy. And, my high school was fantastic. I lived in Ridgewood, New Jersey. It was a great school system. And from there, I went to college and medical school. But my childhood was wonderful. I have no complaints.
Wow. And I think I read somewhere that you were the first person in your extended family that to attend medical school. Is that correct?
Yes. I think I'm still the only person.
Wow. So everybody's calling you. I don't know.
Everybody calls. It's actually, I'm so happy to be able to refer them places and answer questions. And it's just great. I'm anxious. None of my children seem to want to do medicine, and I'm anxious about who's going to take care of me when I'm retired and older.
I know, you hear about this in history and through my parents. You say a doctor in the family, and then never you realize really the importance of a doctor in a family, especially in times like this. Someone that you can just call no matter what time it is, and you get some sort of advice.
Yes, well, I have several cousins who are nurses, and they're equally helpful.
That's great. And so you, for me, it's easy to establish a passion in someone, a doctor, someone like you. Normally, I have guessed that, sometimes we go through different career paths and, you struggle to get to that passion. So I take it when you're a doctor, it has to be vocation, because otherwise you wouldn't make it through medical school, I think, if it wasn't something you really enjoyed.
I think that's true. Although, there's a lot of areas of medicine that are very different. And I think it does take some time. And I think it took some time for me to find exactly where my interests fit best and where my passion was. I don't think I necessarily found that immediately.
Oh, I love to hear more about that. Tell me about what did you feel? Did you ever feel? Go ahead.
I didn't go to medical school to be an anesthesiologist. I don't think that that's necessarily high on, the list of high school and college students. It's a little bit hidden from public view. But I really fell in love with being in the operating room and immediate sorts of feedback from patients. What I get to do is, I get to, anesthetize people, wake them up, and everything that I do for them is I get immediate feedback. I don't have to wait for months to see if their blood sugar comes down with the treatment. And but I think that's important to know about yourself, because different people, some people don't want that immediate feedback, or that's not their passion. Their passion is really to follow somebody for months and months and, help solve problems that way. I didn't realize that until I was exposed to it in medical school. So I think you have to be open to things that you weren't expecting in your life, and not just reject things that you didn't think about before. And then within anesthesiology, right now I'm in charge of quality and patient safety for my department and for some other departments in our healthcare system. And I really, this is not something that I thought I was going to do. Even when I was an anesthesiology resident, it was not, I didn't say, I want to be the vice chair of patient safety, And so, these things some things come to you, and you discover what your passion is sometimes in spite of yourself.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
So I actually was going down a career path of trying to do clinical research while taking care of patients. I work at an academic medical center, and, my dad had surgery and had multiple complications after that surgery, some of which I felt at the time might have been avoided. And that really caused me to look at what we do, on a daily basis to patients. Sometimes it's incredible that, it's surgery and anesthesiology it's really a miracle that we can do things to patients that we do in the goal of fixing something or curing something. It's really, the human body is amazing that it can tolerate an operation of any kind. But there are ways that we can always do better. And science evolves over time, and we know now things that we didn't know 20 years ago. And so we have better ways of taking care of people. And I think it's important to continually incorporate that new knowledge into what you do. And so I think I took my experience with my dad as the family member, and as someone who watched a family member, have a successful surgery, but then he actually died from an infection. Really, it was very, very painful. And it's really only recently that I've come to accept the fact that this has contributed directly to why I'm in quality and patient safety.
Wow.
So I took, what I was doing at the time, at the time when he passed away, I then had to take care of my mother. As I said, I was an only child. And I had 3 children. And my husband's also a physician. It was quite a busy time. So I made a decision to pivot away from clinical research, which was very difficult to do with that whole setting. And I had some administrative duties, and I really sort of started to focus on, for whatever I was doing that day, making sure that the quality, consciously making sure that the quality was excellent. I think we do it unconsciously as physicians. We're always trained in quality and to do things the best we can do. But I think I became more intentional about it and noticing things. Well, why do we do that a certain way? Why wouldn't, B be better? And so looking back on it, I didn't even realize at the time I was doing that. It's only with a lot of reflection that I realized that really did change how I saw everything about medicine.
Wow, that's very, you said so many things there that are so powerful. And I thank you for that, because I can tell you're speaking from the heart and of painful experiences. I can only imagine being a doctor and seeing your father in that circumstance and not being able to help as much as you would like.
Yes.
And but then the great wisdom in taking that experience and now acknowledging that it happened and you made something out of it, that it's very powerful. And,
yes.
I can speak for everybody, but anesthesiologist is almost like one of the most important jobs, because as a patient that has been on that circumstance, you're the last person you see.
Yes.
Almost that usually you talk to us, you talk to the patient, you put them at ease. And just that warmth that you're showcasing, it's really, I'm sure, why you make the difference in the work you do, because you there's a human quality, I think, that doctors cannot afford to lose, no matter in what category of medicine you are exercising. But it's something that, and I understand why sometimes it's lost, because also it's a very demanding, very difficult. You deal with patients every day and problems, but that humanity, it's so important.
It is. I think it can take, especially recently in the past year, I think people understand more now that it can take a big toll on us. I do mostly neuroanesthesiology, and I have a lot of healthy patients who have spine trouble that will be cured with their operation. But I also have a lot of patients who have brain tumors that are very difficult to cure. And it is very difficult when you're in an operating room and the pathology report comes back. The patient's still asleep and it's not good news. And the whole room just gets deflated. Everybody. The surgeon, the nurses, even if we all thought it was not going to be good news going in, you always want to give that patient hope that, the scan looks one way, but it will be not that bad.
Yes.
You always want to hold out that hope. And then, when that hope is kind of taken away, I don't think people realize the impact that it has on physicians and nurses and everybody else. And I think that sometimes in order to protect themselves, physicians, put up a wall at times where they seem cold, because that's just emotionally very difficult to do that day in and day out.
I totally understand it. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's a vocation that you have to deal with so many aspects, not only the aspect that you're in a surgery and you already know that this is going to be, a very hard problem to solve or almost impossible, but you still have to give your 100%.
Yes.
Or 150%, because you want that to happen. As a quick side story, my parents were once in a very, very bad car accident. and 13 cars in Sicily. They're Italian, so they went for a wedding, and there was a tunnel, 13 cars. Well, long story short, my dad had internal bleeding, but when he got to the hospital, they didn't realize, so they checked him out, and then, he had to be rushed back in. And he was in the hospital for 2 months trying to assess what was wrong. But again, long story short, he had to have his emergency surgery at 4 a.m. in the morning. They changed hospitals. And then the one thing that stuck with him, he said, once I got into surgery, there's this doctor that had been called at 4 a.m. in the morning. And as soon as they saw my dad, they say, well, you're bringing me dead bodies. And then my dad said, doctor, if you want, I want. And those were the if you want to do this, I want to do this. And thank God he survived and he recovered. But, my dad said, I don't know, if I had been already asleep, probably I would have died, because it was me telling the doctor, I'm here if you're here for me, and doing this, and it's just such a life-changing experience that I imagine that a doctor is woken up at 4 a.m. in the morning and gets a patient that doesn't look good at all.
Yeah.
And so, that's something that stopped. My dad is now 86, but he always tells that story that, I gave that doctor an extra push for me.
Yeah, that's important. I think that we, I think what we say is extremely important, and we don't always say the right thing. It's very difficult to make that connection sometimes, and in an emergency situation, you have even less time than usual, to try to establish a relationship with a patient. You have 2 seconds instead of, what I normally have is I say I have 5 minutes of time, so it's not easy, but I'm glad he spoke up, because that does change everything in the room. It really does. It makes the person who comes in sometimes after a trauma is not conscious, and it's very stressful for all of us. And it is a little bit easier to put up a wall, and not necessarily absorb the humanity of the person that's there and just think about the problem.
Yeah, I love that, absorbing the humanity. So that, it's very inspiring to know that now you champion this patient safety and quality improvement, where you focus, as you said, how you started into it. So I definitely want to hear more about that. Like, I'm sure you made this a kind of a mission, especially in pandemic times. So what can you share there in terms of what you do and what your institution is doing to improve that quality for patients?
Well, I think it all starts actually with reviewing events. So an event might be something that is, everything was done totally perfectly well, but the outcome is not what we wish. And then sometimes, people do make mistakes. We, in 2019, our institution did 77,000 anesthetics. So you can imagine, with all of that, there are some things that could have been done better. And the vast majority of those, there's no harm whatsoever to the patient. But we noticed, the medication, we gave the antibiotics too early, we gave them too late. We were distracted by something, a piece of equipment stopped working. There's a lot of things that go into a safety check and that happen. And we review every single one of those events, whether it be a major event or a little event. Even so much that, sometimes a patient will say, I had terrible bruising from my intravenous. And, if the level of concern is raised, so the patient actually comments on it, we will take a look at it, because maybe something could have been done differently. Maybe, that's not necessarily a great example, but, everything that happens, we take a look at. From, sometimes when somebody has a breathing tube placed, a tooth will get chipped, even those. And that's, very important for the patient. But in the scheme of major complications for us, that is something that sometimes happens. And so we address it. We make sure that the right equipment was used, that the person was trained properly before they did that procedure, that the environment in the room was correct, that everything was clean. There's a lot of checks that go into things before a procedure. And so there are checklists. I'm sure you've heard about checklists.
Yeah.
That was really championed by an anesthesiologist at Johns Hopkins and the World Health Organization for certain procedures to have a checklist to make sure you have everything ready before you start. And also, I think the, Miracle on the Hudson story with Captain Sullenberger, he's in the middle of a crisis and he actually pulls out a paper checklist. Mm-hmm. In spite of his years of flying, he went back to rely on the checklist. Let's make sure, because when you're in a crisis, you can't forget a step. Mm-hmm. And so we actually have, in spite of all our computer, everything's on computer now. But in spite of all of that, we still have a paper emergency manual in every operating room, mm-hmm. even though, we have it on the computer and, sometimes the computer will make suggestions to you. Mm-hmm. We still have that. So I really think it all comes from reviewing events and my colleagues' suggestions. A lot of our faculty has trained, I've been here forever, but has trained at other places where they do things slightly differently. And so they will come to me with a suggestion, say, hey, where I did my residency, we handled, warming a patient before the operating room so they don't get too cold. We handled it with such and such a device. You don't seem to have that here. Why not? And so we share all these ideas about what is called, we refer to it as best practices. Mm-hmm. So we share that in our department. We share that with other departments, these ideas, especially with surgical departments, because they really bring the patients to the hospital and they have the first contact with them. Oh. And we also share it within institutions. So one of the organizations I work with is the New York State Society of Anesthesiologists and the American Society of Anesthesiologists. And those of us interested in quality and patient safety serve on committees, and we share best ideas from across the country. And that was really, really evident when COVID first hit the United States. I mean, we formed all sorts of, video messaging and email groups, and we had meetings, virtual meetings and calls at least weekly. What are you doing at your hospital? What are you trying with these patients? What are you doing to place breathing tubes? How are you protecting yourself? Where are you getting PPE? How are you making your operating room an ICU? How are you making your recovery room an ICU? How are you doing anything normal? Doing anything normal that you usually do? So I think that, we had departmental almost daily meetings and then video meetings. And then, statewide, it was weekly. And we had open forums on the internet that people would post questions and share ideas. And I have to say, it really brought out the best in physicians. People who didn't normally work together. Both surgeons and anesthesiologists all became ICU doctors. And, nurses worked outside of their normal way of working. Nurses who were not ICU nurses became ICU nurses. And, we did the best we could. It was overwhelming.
I believe it. And I think that's one of the things that it became clear I see it as a patient, as a citizen, is the amount of commitment that our healthcare professionals had during this time and still have, where the stories were just unbelievable in terms of the sacrifices, so around the clock shifts, putting their own health at risk. Is just really, as with any challenging experience, it forces you to rise to the top and become better. And hopefully, we keep tapping into that we just learned, and we're still learning through the pandemic, and being able to transfer it going forward into the new normal, as we're calling it.
I think one of the silver linings is that, sometimes there can be some conflict between different medical specialties. We want a medical evaluation before the patient comes to the operating room. The Department of Medicine says they don't need an evaluation. They might not really understand our concerns, and vice versa. that is much improved now because we know each other. There were silos that were definitely broken down by people working together because they were forced to, as opposed to, they would never work together otherwise, usually. So I think that we have definitely developed better relationships with other specialties that we don't normally work with. And that just serves to improve patient safety. You now have more people you could pick up the phone. And, if I'm worried about something, instead of saying, oh, no, you don't have to worry about that. The question is now, well, why are you worried? And what can I do to, give you more information? It's a very different conversation now.
Yeah, and I agree. And I sometimes call it like the COVID response in a way, like when anything you do right now, it's so much more efficient because there's concern of I cannot have people in the same room or, and you try to avoid, even at school, things the kids do, it's almost like streamlined, right? And so I
don't know if it's more streamlined.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
But
true.
Effort is that the consciousness is there, that we're all working together and that, we have to collaborate and cooperate rather than, stick to our protocol.
Absolutely. And I'm in telecommunications. So I've seen, we know that there's technology out there that has been available for, years. And so I wrote a blog recently on telemedicine and saying this technology was there. This is something that we could have done years earlier, but there was no compelling event for us to adopt it until COVID arrived. And now there's a big compelling event and say, okay, if you can see a patient, this way on a Zoom call, now you're in a way kind of streamlining this in person or, you're doing things differently. And this was available to us. Even, I'm religious, so I watch the mass, and I know that a lot of people were complaining and people are not coming to church anymore. But recent statistics show that there's even sometimes more people like watching the mass because now they don't leave their house.
Right.
And so now it's like, okay, do I want them to come here, but I have less people, or I much rather have people watching wherever they are, but they're watching. And so I think we're having to face all these kind of changes, and we don't know how to deal with it yet, but not all is bad.
Well, one of the things is I think that this, video or telemedicine, whatever you want to call it, the focus going forward should be, I think, about the convenience of the patient. How much effort did we put into putting the elderly into ambulettes and getting them to the office for something that maybe they didn't need a full physical exam for? I don't think it can, it can't replace a physical exam. There's some things technology can, you could put an electronic stethoscope and listen to the heart. You can listen to the lungs if the patient can put, the device on themselves properly. You see that the ads for the electrocardiogram on your phone. All those things are fantastic. But I think that a lot of follow-up patient visits and certainly a lot of pre-anesthesia visits can certainly be done via telemedicine. And the patient doesn't have to come in. What an effort we spent to get lots of patients to come in. Family members taking days off from work. They have to drive. They have to get an ambulette. Got to get a wheelchair. It's just a lot of non-patient centeredness happened to get the patient in. So I think that I truly believe that's going to stay with us moving forward. We just have to sometimes, especially the elderly, are not great with technology. So we need help with that. We need to simplify some of that.
Yeah, my industry, it's obviously we're big on the digital divide and the homework gap and everything that, because it's true. You also can discriminate with technology if you don't make it readily available for everybody. And that's something, at least in the telecom industry, that we are very aware of. And we have to find a way, you have to give options. Sometimes I get upset when I go to park my car and now the only option is the pay by phone app. In some places, you have to make it available for someone that is not technology savvy or the elderly that don't have the app. So we cannot completely forget about that. But the exciting part is that having leaders like you, in the medical field that are, so patient-centric, I think is one of the key words that I heard you say, and that shows that we're definitely moving in the right direction.
No, I think so. I think that is really what it's all about. And I tell the residents every day, I'm very lucky. I get to take care of one patient at a time usually. A lot of other physicians have multiple patients at the same time, and that's difficult. But I mean, you just need to focus on doing the best you can. And I tell the people that I'm training, you need to treat this patient like your parent or like your child. And I think when you do that, if you just make that your practice and you keep reinforcing that, then the patient care gets much better because it makes everybody pause and say, okay, is this something that I would be doing if this were my family member? Mm-hmm. And if you can say yes, then you're doing the best you can. And that's, really all we can hope for. You got to pay attention and treat everybody as if they were your family. And that's, the way I see things. So.
I love that. So, Patricia, when you're not doing, big stuff in the medical field, what are your other passions? Like a big part of what I'm interested in is how do you nurture yourself when you've had like a tough day and you need to reconnect to what makes you tick? What do you do?
Well, I have to say that, I'm just really focused on my family. I have 3 beautiful children, all boys.
Oh, wow.
They're 26, 22, and 15.
Okay.
They have I've always had a lot of activities that, because I'm not there during the day, I really try to make an effort to be there in the evening and to do whatever I can do with them or for them on the weekends and the evenings. And so I have to say that I'm a little bit boring in that I don't have a major outside passion except for my children and whatever they want to do. But they're all very into sports. So I go to a lot of sporting events. And, that actually brings me great joy to see them be happy at what they're doing. But it is a lot of time. They are actually quite good athletes. And so they train and they go and, play sports all over the place.
And that's great. No, I think I think that's what makes you connect is seeing your kids happy. That's the same answer my mom would give it. And I always, because I'm big, on diversity and inclusion, and in my industry, we don't have that many women. And so it's always something that I bring forward. And I always say, well, I had a mom that was a housewife her entire life. And I always try to ask her questions about, don't you wish you had done this? Don't you wish you had done that? And she's just so happy. She say, my biggest achievement is seeing my 3 kids being happy and successful. And she really means it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we also, as women, sometimes we tie that mentality or that happiness to something like, oh, well, she didn't want to do anything else. And what's wrong with her? And I think there's a lot to say in having that, figure out the happiness of your kids as one of our main goals in life.
It is. And I actually have made several choices professionally that have, to facilitate my being home at times that I needed to be. And, part of that whole episode around my dad, it made me change my direction professionally. And if you were to look at my CV, there is about a 10-year gap there of from 2005 to 2015 where you don't really see much. I mean, I was doing things, but it wasn't, to the degree that, one might have thought, in my profession. Mm-hmm. So you do sometimes have to make choices, and it's never the wrong choice. It's whatever is working best for you.
I think that's important advice. I think that a lot of women, especially because we are caregivers, this is a fact. I mean, I think there's research right now available that says that women we have added hours to our day already of a very busy day. We have, I don't know, I saw the report and I know I feel it. I don't know, I say I'm part of that result. And we have to make big compromises. And but at the same time, once you come to terms with them, like, for instance, I work for the family business and I have a great career, but I always, people say, well, if you work for someone else, maybe you'll be higher or you'll be making more money or you will. But I say, yeah, but I have a flexibility
Yes.
that is priceless, you know?
That is very important. It's very important if that's what you need. It's worth whatever amount in your paycheck. It really is, to be able to know that, you know, you're able to do what you need to do outside of work and be available when you need to be. It's a priceless thing that I've always had. And like I said, there were some choices that I made to ensure that, which may or may not have impacted my career. I think, you know, one of the things that I like to say about my career is that I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be, even though I didn't know it at the time. And, you know, I'm just thrilled with what I get to do every day, which is, not everybody can say that. And, you know, I'm just really very blessed.
Well, I'm so happy you shared that, because I know we have a lot of women in the audience and you know, business women or women with big professions, and they hesitate taking those 10 years that you shared that you took, or 5 years, or whatever it is that you need to take, because they feel the train is going to leave them behind. And as you say, maybe it does, but as long as you end up where you are supposed to end up, then what's the problem, right? You start seeing life with different eyes.
Yes. Well, I just assumed at the time that I was not going to advance professionally, that I was going to spend my time taking care of my patients. And I had a couple of administrative responsibilities, and that was going to be it. And, you know, I made that decision. And of course, I was a little bit disappointed professionally, but it turns out that I probably am, you know, in a position now that I never would have been had I not taken that break and found this true passion for quality, which, you know, came about sort of backwards in a way. It never would have happened. So you never know. And I think you just have to remain open. And if you have to make a choice to interrupt your career, or not your career necessarily, either your career or your, you know, career ascension in whatever field you're in, because of outside forces or choices, I think you can rest easy with that. It is the best decision that you make at that time, and you take it from there. So, well,
that's that's very powerful advice. You know, I'm taking notes from all this wisdom that you're sharing. I feel blessed to get to interview these amazing guests, as you can see. And so it's been great to have you. I don't want to let you go without giving you the opportunity. Is there anything else that you're excited about in your life? A son, getting married, anything, or new project, anything you want to share? You have an open microphone.
I mean, I have so much I'd like to share with beyond another hour.
Well, then you have to.
No, I mean, my children are working. My oldest is working in a field he loves. He's a financial analyst for a great company, and just was contributing to a great deal. My middle son plays lacrosse at the University of Michigan, and you know, he's hoping for a good season this year. Hopefully they'll play through whatever comes with COVID. And my youngest is a sophomore in high school, and, you know, trying to navigate the COVID high school world, which is not easy. And my husband's a cardiac surgeon, who's actually the best doctor I know of any physician I've ever met. He's the smartest, and, you know, he has the same passion for quality that I have. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, we're there to support each other after a long, hard day, because we do understand. And sometimes we don't talk about anything else. That's the downside of it.
That's the downside.
But, you know, I'm just very blessed. And you know.
That's great. You know, as you said, it sounds like family. It's the most important thing to have. You know, it's just to listen and describe your relationship with your husband, the admiration, which, you know, I could have another episode just on that. But I think the admiration of your spouse is such an important thing to have for successful marriages, where you admire your spouse, and it just shows right now what you just said, that admiration. So it's inspiring to me. And, you know, I wish the best for your son. Sounds like exciting times. And, you know, I really I want to thank you on behalf of all the patients that you probably have treated, that, you know, you guys do amazing work. It's inspiring, admirable. And I really, I'm a fan already of your work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise, thank you. And you have an open invitation any other time at Back to Basics.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit LeticiaLatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.